The knock came sharp and unexpected. Jacob Hayes, a single dad with grease still under his fingernails from his late shift at the garage, swung open the door, expecting the nanny he'd finally scraped enough money to hire. But instead, standing there in the glow of the porch light, was a young woman with striking green eyes, trembling hands clutching a worn leather bag. Her coat was too thin for the November cold. And though she tried to hold her chin high, her voice cracked when she whispered, "I used to be a billionaire's daughter, but I've got nowhere else to go." Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. **** Jacob blinked once, then twice, trying to make sense of what he had just heard. He was bone-tired. His shirt stained with oil, his muscles stiff from 12 hours under hoods and engines, and now this. His 6-year-old daughter Emily peeked out from behind his leg, clutching her stuffed rabbit to her chest, eyes wide at the sight of the stranger on their porch. Jacob's voice came out harsher than intended. "Who are you supposed to be?" The young woman straightened a little, though her knees trembled as if they were seconds from giving out. "My name is Clare Donovan. I answered your ad for a nanny. But if this was a mistake, if you don't want me here." Her throat bobbed as she tried to swallow her pride. "I'll go." She took half a step back, clutching the strap of her bag as though it were a lifeline. Emily tugged Jacob's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered so softly he barely caught it. "She looks cold." That tiny voice pierced the hardened wall Jacob had built around himself since his ex-wife walked out 3 years ago. He was a man who had learned the world would not hand him kindness. And yet, here was his daughter reminding him that kindness wasn't about what you got. It was about what you gave. With a reluctant sigh, Jacob stepped aside. "Fine, come in. You look like you're about to collapse on my porch." Claire hesitated, her pride battling her exhaustion. Then, with a faint nod, she crossed the threshold. The warmth of the Hayes home wrapped around her like a forgotten blanket. Her eyes swept across the room-patched couch, toys scattered. The faint smell of spaghetti simmering on the stove. It was simple, nothing like the marble hall she had grown up in. But it was real. And safe. Jacob poured her a mug of coffee and slid it across the table. "Billionaire's daughter, huh? What's someone like you doing applying to babysit in a house like mine?" Her fingers tightened around the mug. For a moment she said nothing, staring at the steam curling upward. Then her lips parted. "Because I lost everything. And all I have left is learning how to be useful to someone again." Emily, curious, climbed into a chair across from her. "You don't have a family anymore?" she asked innocently. The question hit Claire like a punch. Her breath hitched, and she quickly shook her head. "Not the kind that wants me around." Something in her voice, raw, cracked, made Jacob freeze. He'd heard that tone before. He'd lived it when his wife slammed the door one last time. "Listen," he said, his tone softer now. "I don't know what's true or not about your past. But I do know one thing, you're not sleeping out in this cold tonight." Her head jerked up, eyes glassy. "Why would you trust me?" "I don't," Jacob admitted flatly. "But my daughter's right, you look cold. And she's got a bigger heart than I do." Claire glanced at Emily, who smiled shyly and slid her stuffed rabbit across the table. "You can borrow him," the little girl whispered. "He helps me when I'm sad." Claire pressed the toy to her chest, and for the first time in months, she felt something that didn't sting it. Soothed. Jacob leaned back, arms crossed, studying her carefully. He didn't need a spoiled heiress with secrets shadowing her eyes. He needed someone steady, reliable. But something told him maybe, just maybe, this woman on his porch wasn't here by accident. And neither of them had any idea just how much their lives were about to change. ***, Jacob didn't sleep that first night after letting Claire stay. He lay on the worn couch in the living room, arms crossed over his chest, his eyes on the ceiling while the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. He could hear her soft footsteps upstairs in the spare room, the creak of the bed frame as she shifted restlessly. He told himself he was a fool. What kind of man let a stranger into his home, into his daughter's world? But every time he replayed her face in the glow of the porch light, pride cracked in dignity. Bleeding, he remembered how close she had been to collapsing. Morning came early. Jacob was already frying eggs when Emily padded down the hallway, in her pajamas. Behind her came Clare, hair tangled, eyes swollen from a night without rest, but she walked in with her shoulders squared as if daring the day to break her. "Coffee?" Jacob asked, keeping his tone neutral. "Yes, please," she said softly, sliding into a chair. Emily plopped beside her, chattering about school, crayons, and her show-and-tell project. Clare listened intently, nodding and smiling faintly, as if every word the little girl spoke mattered. That small act unsettled Jacob. He had seen women fake smiles before, women who only half listened. Clare wasn't pretending. When breakfast was over, Jacob set down his mug. "So, if you're really serious about working here, I need to know what I'm dealing with." Clare's hands curled into her lap. "You don't have to believe me, but I wasn't lying last night. My father is Victor Donovan. Maybe you've read about him, the shipping empire, the skyscrapers." Jacob raised a brow. He had heard the name, everyone had. But sitting across from him was not the polished heiress from magazine covers. This was a young woman with chipped nails and a jacket that didn't fit right. I told him I wanted to work on my own. I wanted to live without his money. He laughed in my face and said, "You'll crawl back in a week." When I didn't, he cut me off completely. No more accounts, no trust fund. Not even a phone call. That was 6 months ago. Her voice trembled. "I thought I could survive on my own. But the truth is, I couldn't. The money ran out. The so-called friends vanished. And the jobs. Well, no one takes a Donovan seriously when she's scrubbing floors." Silence stretched. Jacob's jaw tightened. He understood more than he wanted to admit. Being left, being underestimated, being forced to prove yourself. Those wounds ran deep. Emily broke the heavy air with a whisper. "Didn't you miss your dad?" Clare blinked, her throat closing. I miss the idea of him. But the man he is now? No." Jacob exhaled slowly. He wasn't sure if she was delusional or brutally honest. But he did know she was broken in ways wealth couldn't fix. "Here's the deal," he said finally, his voice firm. "I don't need a nanny who can't handle the work. My daughter's my whole world. If you want to stay, you prove yourself. You don't get special treatment. And if I catch you lying about anything, you're out." Clare lifted her chin, the faintest fire sparking in her tired eyes. Fair, ***, that day, she threw herself into the role as if her life depended on it. She cleaned dishes without being asked, walked Emily to the bus stop with Jacob, then stayed behind to fold laundry. She didn't complain when the vacuum sputtered or when Emily spilled juice on the rug, but Jacob noticed the cracks. She froze when a luxury SUV rolled by the street, as though afraid someone inside might see her. She flinched when he raised his voice at the television during the news. And twice he caught her staring at her reflection in the window, eyes glassy, as if trying to remember the girl she used to be. That evening, after Emily was asleep, Jacob walked into the kitchen to find Clare sitting at the table, scrubbing stubborn stains out of Emily's school uniform. She didn't notice him at first. Her shoulders were hunched, her lips pressed tight, her eyes fixed on her hands. "You don't have to do that tonight," Jacob said quietly. Her head jerked up, startled. Then she shook her head. "I need to. I have to feel like I can contribute. You've already done more than enough." Her hands stilled, and for the first time that day, the mask cracked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't deserve your kindness." Jacob leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Kindness isn't about deserving, it's about needing." Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. If you knew the things I've said to people, the way I looked down on them, you wouldn't be saying that. Maybe, but I don't care who you were, Jacob said steadily. I care about who you are right now, and right now you're trying. She swallowed hard, her shoulders shaking. For months, every door had slammed in her face. And here, in this modest kitchen, a man with oil-stained hands and exhaustion in his eyes was offering something she hadn't felt in years' grace. Jacob stepped closer, lowering his voice. But I'm warning you, Claire. Don't break my daughter's heart. If you can't stay, if this is just a game for you, leave before she grows attached. Claire pressed the uniform to her chest, her voice ragged. It's not a game. I don't have anywhere else to go. And I don't want to. For the first time, Jacob saw the flicker of truth, not the billionaire's daughter, not the runaway heiress, but a woman stripped bare of everything except the will to belong somewhere again. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Then prove it. Show me you're more than your last name. She nodded, jaw set, though her hands still trembled. I will. And in that fragile promise, in that dimly lit kitchen, two broken lives quietly began to knit together, though neither of them had the faintest idea just how tested that promise would soon be. The days turned into weeks, and Jacob found himself watching a transformation unfold before his eyes. Clare, the girl who once stood shivering on his porch with nothing but pride and a worn leather bag, was slowly becoming part of their home. At first, Jacob thought it was temporary. She'd stay until she found her footing, then disappear like everyone else who had passed through his life. But it wasn't like that. Claire didn't just perform the duties of a nanny. She poured herself into the role with a determination that bordered on desperate. She braided Emily's hair in the mornings, learned which bedtime stories soothed her, and even stitched the hole in her stuffed rabbit as if it were the most important task in the world. Yet Jacob also noticed the nights when he'd wake for a glass of water and see the light under her door still glowing. He'd peek inside to find her hunched over borrowed library books, child psychology guides, cookbooks, budgeting manuals. She was teaching herself how to survive, page by page, lesson by lesson. One Friday evening, Jacob came home later than usual. Work had been brutal, and his muscles screamed for rest. But as he pushed open the door, he froze. There, in the living room, Claire sat cross-legged on the rug with Emily. They were laughing, really laughing, while playing a board game. Emily's giggles bounced off the walls, filling the house with a sound Jacob hadn't realized he'd been missing. Claire's eyes sparkled with an unguarded joy that stripped away the last traces of the billionaire's daughter. She looked human, real. Jacob leaned against the doorframe, a strange warmth spreading in his chest. For years his world had been work and responsibility, survival and exhaustion. Now for the first time, he felt a flicker of something else. Hope, but hope was dangerous. He knew better than to trust it. Later that night, as Emily slept, Jacob stepped out onto the porch to clear his head. Claire joined him, wrapping herself in a thin blanket. The night air was sharp, the stars burning cold above. Your daughter, Claire said softly, her breath forming clouds. She's incredible. You've raised her to be kind, gentle. I don't think I've ever met a child like her. Jacob's gaze stayed fixed on the dark horizon. She's all I've got. Everything I do is for her. Silence stretched between them until Claire whispered, You asked me once why I'd show up here. Why a Donovan would scrub floors and wash dishes. Do you really want to know? Jacob turned, studying her profile, the way the moonlight traced the slope of her cheek, the sadness in her eyes she tried to bury. I wouldn't have asked if I didn't. She gripped the blanket tighter. My father didn't just cut me off. He humiliated me. At a gala, in front of hundreds of people, he announced I was a disgrace, that I had no ambition, that I'd never amount to anything without him. The crowd laughed. And I stood there frozen, trying not to let them see me break. Her voice cracked. I walked out that night and never went back. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear them laughing. Jacob's chest tightened. He knew humiliation. He knew what it meant to have the world strip you down to nothing. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. She gave a bitter laugh. "Strong? I've been living on borrowed kindness. If you hadn't opened that door." Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "I don't know where I'd be." Jacob's hand itched to reach out, but he clenched it into a fist. At his side, "Everyone deserves a second chance, Claire. Even you." The words lingered in the night air, heavier than either of them expected. The following week tested them both. Emily came home from school in tears after some kids mocked her for not having the latest sneakers. Claire held her, whispering softly, then took her hand and marched her back to the store where those kids had laughed. Claire knelt down and told Emily in front of everyone, "Don't ever think you're less because of what's on your feet. You're worth more than all their shoes combined." Emily's chin lifted, her tears drying. Jacob, who had been ready to storm into the school, stood frozen, watching Claire fight his battles in a way he never expected. That night, he finally admitted to himself what he'd been avoiding. Claire wasn't just a guest. She wasn't just a fallen heiress. She was becoming family. But with family came fear. Fear of losing it all over again. One evening, as Claire tucked Emily into bed, Jacob overheard his daughter whisper, "I wish you were my mom." The words pierced him like a blade. He retreated to the kitchen, his mind racing. Could he trust Claire with something that sacred? Could he let his guard down when his daughter's heart was already in her hands? Later, when the house was quiet, Jacob confronted her. "Emily called you Mom tonight." Claire froze, her face pale. "Jacob, I didn't tell her to. I know." His voice was low, strained. "But do you understand what that means? She's letting you in. And if you walk away," his throat tightened, "she won't recover. Neither will I." Claire's hands shook as she reached across the table. "I don't want to walk away. For the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere, like I matter. Please, don't push me out." Jacob searched her eyes, looking for cracks, for deception. All he found was fear and truth. And slowly, his walls began to crumble. "Then stay," he said hoarsely. "Stay and prove to me and to her that you're not going anywhere." Tears finally slipped down Claire's cheeks, but this time, they weren't only born of shame. They were tears of relief, of hope, of something new being built out of ruins. In that moment, Jacob realized something he hadn't dared to believe in years. Maybe kindness didn't just save others. Maybe it could save him, too. And under that modest roof, in the quiet of an ordinary home, a broken billionaire's daughter and a weary single dad began to piece together something extraordinary. Family.